Hello people, how's it going? Scotty.
I'm no communist, I'll tell you that right now. I believe a man should own his own house and car and cow. I like this private ownership, I want to be left alone. Let the government run its business and let me run my own.
So those of you may remember me doing a video a while back and it was called UKIP Myths Debunked, and I done it on this boy called Camea. So a boy came along and asked me to do a video response to Camea, and I done the video response on his video, and then I got a video response from Camea. The problem is with Camea was the very fact that in my video response, which was over about an hour long, I had touched upon largely on capitalism not being corporatism. I completely destroyed them on the entire argument, and when he went to do the video response, I got nothing back on that very issue. And instead, what he done was he swerved around it. So I hadn't heard from him for well over 2 years, and finally now he's gotten back with a new video. And surprise, surprise, it's only came about after I had deleted all of my other videos. I wonder why. Coincidentally, after of course the debate between me and himself, he turned towards Libertarian Socialism, which contradicted everything that he had protested towards myself. This was the same person who called me an idiot for talking about deregulation of the economy.
And that's exactly why there are regulations in place in order to prevent corporations from forming monopolies. This idea of a totally free market with no regulations whatsoever is completely fictional, and I'm glad that's the case.
The mistake that he'd done was keeping his video there on his channel, and then saying he's no longer a Keynesian. He's now, of course, a Libertarian Socialist. Because in that video, he mentions his support of the government regulation, and talking about if it isn't for government regulation, wherever would we be? We would all be exploited, and of course we would face monopolies. This of course contradicts everything that he now supports, because he now supports what you call Libertarian Socialism, an oxymoron. If you don't understand what it means he supports socialism without a government. In other words, this is what anarchism means. It means to have socialism without a government. Okay? This means he supports anarchy. But the problem is the very fact that his socialism cannot exist without a government. One of the goals, of course, of socialism is to abolish all the means of private ownership. After all, private ownership is what's representative of capitalism. The problem with socialism is, however, theoretically, it's all nice to try and aim for complete nationalization. However, it never turns out that way in the real world, because the real world is not the same as the theoretical world. The real world is different. That's why, let's say I write a book called The Theories of How Pigs Can Fly. What's the problem? The problem is that the real world defies me. The problem is the very fact that I cannot ignore the laws of gravity. That's the problem. And this is the problem with what we call idealist socialists. Idealist socialists live in a dream world. They ignore praxeology. And here's an example. Look around you to all of the people who are demanding higher paid wages. There's even a lot of socialists out there today who are demanding higher paid wages. And what's the problem with that? Well, this contradicts his Libertarian Socialism in the real world, because his Libertarian Socialism is aiming for a moneyless society that's classless. And the very problem with that is the very fact that people don't want to work for free. People want to work for a wage. That's the problem. But that's right, Camea is there to call me a deluded idiot. Camea is the same person who calls me the nutcase. So what exactly is the problem with Libertarian Socialism? The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, with Libertarian Socialism is the very fact that it seeks to abolish the means of private ownership. That means taking away private ownership of land and of course private ownership of business. And the only way you can get people into a collective group is by using the means of force. But these people seem to believe that they can somehow, rid the government, and somehow we'll all come together in some happy land, and we'll all join together in communal ownership. We'll all share together, and there will be equality. That's always been the goal of socialism. It's always been the goal of equality. But how do you ensure that without a central planner? The problem is, ladies and gentlemen, you really cannot, eradicate the state and then expect there to be no central planner. After all, who's going to ensure there's going to be equality? And at the end of the day, what does socialism seek to do? It seeks to prevent individuals having their own private business or their own private land. By seeking to prevent, you're going against the very meaning of the word liberty. So in his recent video in response to my top 10 reasons why Nazi Germany was socialist, he goes on calling me a right-wing this and an idiot this and an idiot this, that and the next thing. And then he points out about the, Nazis marching under red banners and flags. But calls me the idiot because the fact that I linked this to socialism. The problem with that very argument is the very fact that this was connected to socialism, and the most important key point is the very fact that in my blog post I pointed out that the Nazis had, of course, marched under red banners and flags on May Day. Why is it important to point out about May Day? Well, May Day has been around since, of course, the days of the Roman Empire, but of course, in recent times, from the 1800s onwards, the socialists had made it more or less a day of their own. It's a day of anti-capitalism. You can check out the link below on the Socialist Review, who even point this out themselves about May Day. And you can go and check out sources for yourself on May Day and learn all about May Day. Why? Because that's exactly what the Nazis had marched under. Red banners and flags on May Day. And they didn't do it for nothing. What's most important, however, is the very fact that the word collectivism is synonymous to the word socialism. I've pointed this out numerous times, and I don't really need to point that out again. So what I'll do is I'll read out the definitions of collectivism and, of course, socialism. Collectivism. The principles or system of ownership and control of the means of production and distribution by the people collectively, usually under the supervision of government. That's collectivism. Socialism. A system or condition of society in which the means of production are owned and controlled by the state. And 2. Any of various theories or systems of social organisation in which the means of producing and distributing goods is owned collectively or by a centralised government that often plans and controls the economy. Again, let's revert back to collectivism. The principles or system of ownership and control of the means of production and distributing by the people collectively. What's the most important key point here? Well, the most key important point of the issue is that both socialism and collectivism both mean that production is in the hands collectively. Now, whether that's talking about the people collectively or through the means of the government collectively, production is owned and controlled by the people or the state collectively, and of course, this is what it means by collectivism and socialism. They're both synonymous.
Oh look, someone on YouTube trying to reconcile the fact that their arguments are shit by appealing to the dictionary. Definitely didn't see that one coming. Not necessarily. There is a meaningful distinction to be made between nationalization and collectivization. If an industry is nationalized, then it's controlled by the state. If an industry is collectivized, that means that it's directly managed by the workers in that industry. The word socialism has been used to describe both of these things, and you've simply ignored this completely.
Collectivism. The principles or system of ownership and control of the means of production and distribution by the people collectively, usually under the supervision of government. That's collectivism. So we'll now read out, of course, on individualism. A doctrine advocating freedom from government regulation in the pursuit of a person's economic goals. In other words, it basically and simply means individuals' liberty to seek their own economic goals and paths from the government. So ask yourself this, ladies and gentlemen. Was Nazi Germany individualist, or was Nazi Germany collectivist? Well, ask yourself this. Who was it that planned the economy? Who was it that organised the economy? Who was it that managed the economy and controlled it? Who was it that strongly regulated private business? Think. This was the same Nazi Germany where we saw the likes of education that was nationalised, healthcare that was nationalised, the automobile industry that was nationalised, churches were nationalised, the banks were nationalised in, of course, Austria. But of course, we'll ignore all that. What I'll leave you with, ladies and gentlemen, is of course a video by Kitty Werthmann. This old lady was a survivor from Nazi Germany, from Austria, and she will tell you in her own words it was socialist. And don't be surprised that, of course, if they call her a liar. You know, this is the type of people they are. They don't care about, you know, facts, reason and logic. After all, this comes from the same Camea bams who came out and said this.
Scotty M is an extremely vulgar right-wing libertarian on YouTube. Those of you who remember my exchange with him back when I was a liberal will understand that this person is so immune and impervious to facts, reason and thinking.
So here we have the definition of individualism again. And this time we'll read this one. A doctrine holding that the interests of the individual should take precedence over the interests of the state or social group. Ask yourself this, ladies and gentlemen, after you've seen this definition of individualism. Was that Nazi Germany? Do you honestly believe that Nazi Germany was some sort of movement where the state was nothing other than a servant to the individuals of society, meaning the people? Where the people had economic independence to pursue their own economic goals and paths? Is that honestly what you believe, ladies and gentlemen? If Adolf Hitler was such a individualist, could you please explain to me why Adolf Hitler had nationalised all of those things and of course come out and said to his associate, we must find and travel the road from individualism to socialism without revolution? Ladies and gentlemen, that is the very reason why I cannot take this boy seriously. I cannot take the boy seriously because the last time I ran him so far into the ground on the Industrial Revolution that he contradicts himself now. This was the same Camea Bams, now under the name of Libertarian Socialist Rants, who was going on about the exploitation during the factory years of the Industrial Revolution. Well, there's a very big problem with that. His support of libertarian socialism is now contradicting everything that he claimed about the factories, about the, you know, children being exploited in the workplace. So no, I cannot take Camea Bam seriously. Not when he believes that he can take away the government and somehow everybody will all come together collectively. And of course, without the government, no force will ever be used. Despite the fact that socialism's goal is basically to eradicate, you know, individual ownership, to basically abolish all means of private ownership. You know, this is something that these people don't understand. So like I say, people, this is not someone who lives in the real world. At the end of the day, it's all well saying about community ownership of the means of production. But in reality, when you put socialism into practice, it's just like if you write a book called The Theories of How Pigs Can Fly, the laws of gravity will defy you. Well, it's no different to socialism. It's just a case of that, of course, when it comes to praxeology, praxeology defies socialism, and it's one of these things that you see people around you demanding higher paid wages, and these deluded nutcases seem to think that they can have their socialism without a government, and somehow everybody will just work for free. Somehow people just voluntarily will all just come together for the sake of it, and join together for this communal ownership, which is just, it's all nonsense. And another thing is the very fact that in order to carry out the distribution, which socialism is defined by central planning, he seems to think that this can all just happen magically, just by the snap of the fingers. Doesn't even take into consideration that everybody all has different views, and it'll all go their own ways, which will just basically destroy his whole utopia.